When the final buzzer sounded, Leach was in front of the net, and we just hugged each other. And we're like, we couldn't believe it.
No more curses! This is unbelievable! Let the celebration begin!
I think a lot of that energy and happiness came out in our team, and that's what made me kind of freak out, because Adam Graves was going absolutely crazy, and then he kept on saying 1940.
I thought it was very poetic that the crowd in unison chanted 1940 as the final time to lay the demons to rest.
I just remember hugging, jumping up and down, going nuts. There was a kid sitting a couple rows behind me who was in a tuxedo, and he held a sign that said, "I missed my prom for this." That kind of says it all.
People were cheering and dancing, and people were throwing confetti on the ice, and it was just, pandemonium.
You're going to see the most beautiful piece of silver. The Holy Grail is coming out, folks.
It was the moment you waited your whole life to have, and you wanted to enjoy it and just soak it up.
Look at the hands. These guys have white gloves on, carrying the Stanley Cup.
I started crying. I couldn't help it. I'm getting emotional now just thinking about it. We started kissing people around the section we didn't even know.
They're the champions. And I just collapsed on the couch, and I just started sobbing, and I started crying, and everybody else who was in the house was kind of having the same reaction of, oh my God, that's it, they did it, it's over.
Captain Mark Messier, come get the Stanley Cup.
The realization of being a part of something special was awesome.
Eddie Olczyk.
Be able to lift that thing up and look up towards the garden and the ceiling, and to see the reaction of all the fans.
Mike Keenan.
When I picked that cup from him, it was like a feather. Just lifted it up in complete joy.
That cup weighs 34.5 pounds, and boy, did it lift the pressure on the Rangers. There was that long drought. 1940, the recurring chant that the Broadway Blue Shirts had to deal with again and again and again in 1994, that was over. The guy that was on the ice chanting it himself joins us right now. Adam Graves, your personality is so good, and your season was so great, such a key contributor. You scored 52 goals that year. I would imagine having a teammate like Messier influenced that massive leap for you, a 16-goal improvement.
Well, I will tell you, and I know, Callie, you were a nuts and bolts type player, and you played, scored a lot of goals around the net. And Weeksy, I know you didn't like guys like Callie and I, because we were always in the crease and in your face. But the one thing I quickly realized, I was a product of my environment, and I say that with the most seriousness, that when you play with special players, and that's what Mark Messier and Brian Leach are, they make the game easier. And for me, it allowed me just to simplify my game, playing the trenches, playing the easier areas of the ice, and just go into the corner, win battles, do the things that I knew would help or complement, let's say, those elite players, because I wasn't an elite player. I was a grinder, a mucker, and certainly those might have been the ugliest 52 goals in NHL history, but you take every one of them, and when you have a power play where you have Brian Leach on one side and Sergei Zubov, two of the best defensemen, both Hall of Famers over the last 25, 30 years. And Brian Leach, I mean, he's just incredible. Played 33 minutes a game. He was up and down the ice. So I was a product of my environment, but certainly enjoyed it and loved it.
You know what, Gravy, that was certainly, and I wouldn't expect anything different from you. That was a very humble account of being the great player that you were. But nonetheless, I understand your sentiment, and I want to double down on that. So for you, an elite player yourself, there were so many elite players on that roster, but so many of you that I've spoken to were very selfless on that team. Maybe you can talk about the selflessness that you guys had that allowed you to maximize your team performance, even sometimes if that meant sacrificing some of your own.
Well, certainly, as you guys know, so much of winning is about the culture and about care and about a bigger family. And I've often said this because you see, even on the video that we watched there, how much it meant to so many people. And that was the unique and I guess special. And every time I think about that team and that season and winning the cup, I just pinch myself and feel like, wow, how lucky was I to be a part of that. But I referenced when we had our 25th anniversary, we had at the Seaport in New York, the reunion where Al Chudwick went through and interviewed every player on the team, Neil Smith, Mike Keenan, and you really had a sense of how important every player was. And you look at Eddie Olczyk. We don't win the cup without Eddie Olczyk. We don't win the cup without Nick Kypreos. It wasn't just about Brian Leetch, although he was all world, playing 33 minutes a game. Conn Smythe, 34 points in 23 games, ridiculous numbers. To Mess and the guarantee. To Mike Richter, the way he played. But Mike Richter would tell you one of the most important guys in our locker room was Glenn Healy. And that's someone that you didn't see in the net a lot. But that was a special part. And I think in order to be a champion, you need contributions from everyone at different points, both on and off the ice, in the locker room, traveling. I don't think I played on a team in my entire life where I look forward to getting to the rink more than with that group. And I can tell you, there were so many days that year where you would be crying, you'd be laughing so hard doing your stretches in the locker room and that. It was just, it was a close-knit group and one in which we had a lot of confidence and I think it was built over the entire season. We had to overcome some obstacles and certainly our leadership, starting with number 11, and we all know about the guarantee and some of the big games that he had, but it was a collective, and we don't win without every player playing an integral role, however big or small it might have been.
Gravy, obviously playing in New York and having you around the rink, it was awesome to have you there as a support system mentor. I've always looked up to your game and the way you've played. It's remarkable. So I got a question though. You guys had such a good regular season. You finished with 112 points. And then Neil Smith goes and makes all these trades at the deadline, trading away top players to get in, some other guys that, kind of just fill roles and fill spots. What was that feeling in the room? Because obviously you guys had so much success up to the trade deadline point, and then all of a sudden, you have this turnover where you're getting new guys coming in. There's some familiarity there, obviously, with days in Edmonton, Mike Keenan in Chicago. Bringing guys in that he's had. Just what was the feeling in the room? Like, were you excited? Was it kind of shock? Because I've been in that situation. You could have a little bit of both.
Well, absolutely. And when I was lucky enough to win at Edmonton, we only made, I think, one trade at the trade deadline. And then you fast forward it 4 years later, and we're in New York. And as you said, Callie, we were in first place. And I can remember we were in Calgary, and we made those trades. And with players that I was obviously very close with, when you talk about Tony Amonte and Dougie Waite, who was traded the year before. But when you add guys like Steph Matteau and Brian Noonan, they were big, heavy, hard to play against in long series. And I will fast forward this. When you look at that series against New Jersey, and in particular New Jersey, that might have been one of the great colossal hockey series of all time, where you were fighting for every inch of ice, and the bigger you are and the more you can wear on other teams, and you saw it because the Devils went on to win 3 cups and around guys like Kenny Danico and Scott Stevens and big strong guys, Niedermayer, who was one of the great defensemen, two-way defensemen of all time. But we needed that size and it's always difficult because the players that you have to give up to get those players are just such tremendous people, and you're close to them. And yes, I think as a group, we were a bit surprised, but you know what, our focus was on playing. And a lot of people looked from the outside and said, wow, Rangers are in first overall and they're making all these deals. But again, we don't win unless that exact team is together. That's what history would tell you. And it would also tell you when you look at teams that have won, and I'll look back at St. Louis last year and even Washington the year before, and it becomes a heavy game. And I know the game has changed, it's evolved and changed, and it's never been more skilled. I love watching the game. And Callie, I will tell you, I was so proud watching Cali as a young guy, as an 18, 19-year-old, and watching him develop and become the Ranger captain. And he is a Ranger and will always be a Ranger. And we're proud to say that. But Cali, you would probably tend to agree that it becomes a combination of old hockey and new hockey when it comes to playoff time. It becomes a heavy game. And I think you saw that with the big defense that St. Louis had last year. It just, where there was no room on the ice. And I think sometimes when you add that size, going back to those moves at the trade deadline, it gave you that heaviness to play those long 7-game grinding series. And you could see it, even Brian Leetch, when you can see his hands all taped up. I know Steve Larmer had a broken hand. Sergei Zubov had a crack in the sternum. Like everyone, Boop was hurt. Everyone was banged up, but that's just hockey.
Gravy, I had a chance to sit down and spend some time via Instagram with the great Jonathan Toews earlier in the week. And I asked him what it meant to win in Chicago. But I'm going to ask you, having played in New York and me knowing this area and you being a legend, what was it like winning the Stanley Cup for an iconic franchise in the world's most influential city, that is New York?
Well, again, it was one of those things, as you noted earlier, 53 years and one cup in probably 80 years. I think that everything has to come together. I think that the interesting part for me was the same feeling that you had as a player, you had as a coach or a manager or a fan, or whether you were in the building, 18,200, you were somewhere in New York State, you were somewhere in the United States, you're somewhere in the world. And that's the interesting part about New York, because so many people go to New York and then move to different places. And Cali and Weeksy, you would agree with this. You go down to Florida, you go to California, everywhere you went, you had a section or two. And certainly if you're in the tri-state area, whether it was in, and that's why the rivalry was so good. We go into the island, we heard that 1940 chant every game. Like it was, and it seemed like you heard all the stories of the curse, and the curse being that something would go wrong. One of your best players would have their ankle broken, or a crazy bounce in the goal, and somehow the Rangers weren't able to get over that last hump. But winning in New York, and certainly after 54 years, it was special. And it was special because it meant so much generationally to so many people. And when we talk about sport, and certainly no more, I think, obvious than right now, it's just a game. And it's not that important. The people at the end of the day are important in the journey, and all the things that, and family time and health and all these things that are so important. And I think that championship brought so many people together and created memories that people will never forget. And they did it with people that they love and their friends. And I think that was the real cool part. And for me, the part where you just pinch yourself and say, how lucky were you to be a part of that?
Wow. You and your teammates gave Rangers fans a gift that will last forever. Thanks so much for joining us and the thoughtful answers, taking us inside. Much appreciated.
Well, it's great to see you guys, and look forward to seeing everyone on the other side. Thank you.
That's Adam Graves. If he was a mucker and a grinder, then Mark Messier had a decent career. Understatements! When we come back, we talk about the legend, the only captain to take 2 teams to the Cup. Oil fans remember what this looked like. Don't go anywhere.